How then do we collaborate to help you achieve what you want to achieve? That's a good question, isn't it? And I think that gives also a very good basis then to welcome the government. I like what Sieka also said, and he keeps telling me government is rich. And I like owning it. We are rich. And therefore would like to hear then how can we have a fertile soil, an enabling ground, a collaborative space where then government becomes a key partner, a key strategic partner to support what it is we want to support from this celebration moving forward. So on behalf of the CS, Honorable Mithuki Linturi, my CS as well, when I conclude, I'll let you know my little titles. I'd like to invite my friend, Philip Njane, to come and give his remarks, as well as hers as well. Thank you. Karibu sana.
My name is Phyllis Njane, Director, Research and Innovation in the State Department for Crops. I have a wealth of policy. I'm a policy expert, agricultural policy expert, worked for the ministry in that space for 10 years, developing policies and legal framework. I also am an agribusiness expert and have a wide range of stakeholder engagement experience. So I'm here to present my CS. He was not able to come due to other engagement, but I'm going to read his speech as he would have wanted to say to you, and I'll read word by word. I'll not add, I'll not subtract. I'll just deliver as it was supposed to be given by him. So, here I go. The statement by Honorable Mithika Linturi, Cabinet Secretary, Minister of Agriculture and Livestock Development, on the occasion of the Agri-File Learning on November 7th to 8th, Nairobi. I would want to salute the Group Managing Director and CEO, Equity Bank, Group Managing Director and CEO, CRDB Bank, Tanzania, CEO, FSD, Kenya, Manager, Financial Institutions Group for East Africa, IFC, Chief Administrative Secretary, Ministry of ICT and Digital Economy, Regional Program Director, Africa, Mercy Corps, Program Director, Mercy Corps, Agri-Fi, institutions, leaders, and representatives, all protocols observed. Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to join you today during the 7th Agri-Fi Learning event, ALE, whose theme is Resilient, Inclusive, and Sustainable Food Systems, Enhancing Collaboration to Scale Digital Solutions. To start with, I would like to thank the organizers of this event, that is the Mercy Corps and other collaborators, namely CGAP, FAO, Fine Equity, FSD, Kenya, IDH, IFAD, Mercy Corp Ventures, Spark, Sprout, and the World Bank for the invitation to this event. Ladies and gentlemen, food systems are at the crossroads as a result of some of the most pressing challenges facing humanity today, and more so the African continent. This includes hunger, malnutrition, biodiversity loss, and climate change. The agriculture sector and food system at large are strongly connected to these challenges, thus greatly affecting the way we live. Furthermore, the democratic development have to be included in this equation. The African population will be 2.5 billion in 2050 as compared to the current 1.4 billion, which will be a quarter of the world population living in Africa. In Kenya, the population is projected to increase from the current 53 million to over 90 million in 2050, which will put pressure on production resources, and may lead to biodiversity loss. This will further exacerbate food insecurity, which has not been growing at par with the population growth. This can be demonstrated in the performance of the sector, where food insecurity increased from 15% in 2016 to 28% in 2020. The sub-Saharan Africa has been facing major challenges in the recent past associated with climate change and other international geopolitical development, Ukraine-Russia war, COVID-19, and world economic crunch, which has all affected the food system. It is in this context that more sustainable approaches to food production, marketing, and consumption are needed to transform food systems in Africa using appropriate technologies and innovations, supported by an enabling policy and regulatory framework. Ladies and gentlemen, in Kenya, agriculture plays a fundamental role in our economy, contributing 33.3% of the domestic product directly and another 57% indirectly through the linkages with other sectors. Moreover, the sector employs 40% of our total population and more than 70% of our rural population. Under the theme of agriculture transformation and inclusive growth, our government manifesto recognizes agriculture as a sector with one of the highest growth multiplier effects to lower the cost of living, eradicate hunger, create jobs, expand the tax revenue base, and improve our foreign exchange balances. However, the agriculture sector in Kenya faces its own set of challenges, including low productivity in key food crops such as maize and rice, which poses threat to food security. Our agriculture is predominantly small scale, characterized by low adoption of new farming technologies, reliance on the rain-fed amidst climate changing impacts, and inadequate mechanization. Ladies and gentlemen, to have a resilient, inclusive, and sustainable food system, the many agricultural challenges require interdisciplinary solutions spanning from agronomy, genetics, engineering, and data science. Collaborative efforts encourage cross-disciplinary innovations leading to novel solutions. By pooling resources, both financial and human, through collaborative projects, we can tackle large-scale agricultural challenges effectively and benefit both developed and developing regions. Ladies and gentlemen, data science has a potential to offer digital agriculture solutions to some of the agriculture sector challenges by creating applications that can respond to farmers or stakeholders' needs. This will enable farmers or stakeholders to access real-time information or data, improved access to weather information, and data-driven decision-making will greatly reduce risk associated with agriculture through crops and livestock insurance. In addition, digital solutions have the power to empower the smallholder farmers in Kenya and across the globe. Ladies and gentlemen, the government of Kenya recognizes the key role played by digital agriculture and has undertaken initiatives and policies to promote digital solutions by creating an enabling environment and incentives for upscaling digital solutions through the Ministry of ICT. This can be seen in the increased investment in rural connectivity and ICT infrastructure, promotion of e-extension services for farmers, collaboration with the private sector partners to develop agri-tech solutions and incentives for adopting sustainable farming practices. Ladies and gentlemen, the ministry has embarked or embraced the digital solutions in a farmers register, farm inputs, climate information, electronic extension, processing, and marketing. So far, 11 agencies, government agencies, and 936 services of the ministry are currently onboarded on the e-citizen portal. These agencies include AFA, Agriculture and Food Authority, the Kenya School of Agriculture, the Kenya Seed Company, Nyayo T-Zone, Sony Sugar Company, Tea Board of Kenya, Kenya Dairy Board, ADC Agriculture Development Corporation, AFC Agriculture Finance Corporation, KFIS Kenya, Kenya Health Plant Inspector Services, and NCBP, National Cereal and Produce Board. Ladies and gentlemen, under the National Farmer Register and Information Database, 5.1 million farmers across all the 47 counties with unique ID and telephone numbers have been registered. The farmers are now benefiting from the following services: climate, agronomic, and market information services, government farm input subsidy, mainly fertilizers. Under the farm input services, e-vouchers. Prior to cropping season, farmers are provided with fertilizer through an e-voucher system at National and Cereal Produce Board and Kenya National Trading Corporation depots. Under the National Livestock Infrastructure, the dashboard presents available livestock infrastructure, market for traders, slaughter, milk and meat services, service providers, feed and leather facilities for investment decision-making by national and county governments and development partners. Under the extension services, that is crop selector, the selector provides advice to farmers on what is the best to grow or to keep on their land from a selected of 200 value chains. Under the agriculture information services, farmers call center, toll-free number for farmers to call and get climate-smart agriculture information. Under the Kenya Agriculture Observatory Platform, climate information, KAOP provides real-time 14-day weather forecast for 1,450 words countrywide through the web, short messaging services, USSD, and mobile. Under the application and call center, the toll-free number is 0800 72 1741. Ladies and gentlemen, though there is a potential for agricultural digital solution, there exist challenges and obstacles in implementing the digital agriculture solution, such as access to technology, data security, and resistance to change. In some instances, lack of internet connectivity in the rural areas and ownership of smart farms is low due to high prices. The government's future strategies for overcoming these challenges and achieving the sustainable growth are to put in place policies and legal framework for data protection, increase internet connectivity in the rural areas, and lower the prices of smartphones through local manufacturing. Already, we have a factory, a smartphone factory in Machakos. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, the ministry recognizes the role played by other stakeholders in providing services to the agriculture sector and collaborates with the various stakeholders such as farmers, private sector players, and development partners to achieve its objective. Ladies and gentlemen, with that few remarks, I wish you a fruitful deliberation throughout this session. Thank you. And that's the CS statement. That's what she wanted you to hear. I don't want to add or subtract, but I will welcome the visitors to our country to know that we have a game park around the city, and you can have a go and see what it has to offer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Phyllis. We appreciate the remarks. Kindly pass our regards to the CS. Tell him we appreciate him, and we also appreciate the fact that he found time to have him represented as well as the office. I think from what the speech read, we can hear the government is very intentional in terms of what it wants to do, but it has also offered an array of opportunities for partnerships. So where do we plug in? How do we bring to plug in? So this ushers in the next session, which is the Leaders' Dialogue. And I was sitting there, I remembered, the current government has the better approach. And so we hope in the conversation, in the leaders' dialogue, we'll have a feel of the bottom-up approach to be able then to hear the voices of the farmers and the ecosystem around the farmers to inform that. But I'm grateful for the commitment the government is having, the intentional agencies being created to support digital investments, but also the fact that it recognizes there are gaps, and those gaps present opportunities for us to tap in. And I think of importance is the digital literacy. Being engaging with farmers on a day-to-day, we can feel that has a cascading effect in terms of what we want to tap in, but also the connectivity aspect. So what do you then want to offer in terms of this engagement? Let me usher in and welcome Tamara Cook, who will take us through the leaders' dialogue, and she'll be happy to introduce the panelists. Welcome.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. There's a green light, but aha. Good morning. If I can invite my panelists to come up and join me. When we were discussing in the VIP room in the front, we were saying, oh, these events, sometimes you waste so much time with all these introductions. And so we're not going to do introductions, but I will read their names and titles as they come and join me. We have something more fun planned for the introduction. But I'm pleased to have with me Dr. James Mwangi. It's free seating, guys. No, all protocols have already been observed. Who is the Group Managing Director and Group CEO of Equity Group Holdings. So we also have Abdul Majid Nsekela, the Group CEO and Managing Director at CRDB Bank. We have Jess Chonzi, who's IFC Manager, Financial Institution Groups for Eastern Africa. We hope to have Dinas Itumbi, Chief Administrative Secretary, Ministry of ICT and Digital Economy, joining us later. And we also have Milako Yurga, who's the Regional Director for Africa Mercy Corps. Now, we were hoping this would feel like a conversation, but normally when I have a conversation, I'm not spread out in a straight line. But hopefully you can imagine with us that we are. So I'd love to start with that question that we talked about. What is your personal connection to the farm? We're in this beautiful conference room. There is a bit of green around, but we're very far from the village. Would you like to start? Do you have a mic? Well, a short personal connection to the farm.
Good morning, everyone. And let me appreciate the organizer for inviting us to be part of these important events. My name is Abdul Majid Nsekela. I'm the Group CEO for CRDB Bank, which operates in Tanzania.
Remember what I said. We're not doing introductions. These guys know CRDB. CRDB speaks for itself. What is your personal connection to the farm?
I think the reason why I wanted to expand the language, because I heard about collaborations. And I heard people say, we are going to get partners at the end. Anyway, basically, how do I connect with farmers? I was born in a farm, but I think in the village, not a farm, because a farm must be mechanized. I was raised in a farm, studied, grew all the way until I went to the university. So I'm a farmer, by the way. My mom, she's a farmer. My father, she's a farmer. It's a family of chief. So when I say farming, it's not the modern farming. It's purely the small farmer. And where you see your mom growing you, farming small crops to take it to school. So I understand about the small farmers, and that's how I'm connected.
Great. Dr.
Thank you very much. I was born and brought up in rural agricultural village in Nyagatugu. And I'm a small-scale tea farmer to date. And 60% of equity customers are small-scale farmers. So I've retained the connection.
Jess.
So, like Majid, I was born and raised in the village. My father was an agriculture extension officer, and I think we provided the perfect guinea pigs because he would practice whatever he needed to go and teach the smallholder farmers on us. So, grew up, going to the fields with ox-drawn machinery or equipment and farming.
Milako.
like my colleagues say, who is not connected to farming in one way or another in Africa? We're talking about 70% of the population relying on agriculture for their livelihoods. So to be specific, my background by academy, I'm an ag graduate, my first degree. My earlier years, the first 3 years, I think, I spent with farmers as extension officer, as well as extension team leader. Times have changed, so spending time in the field, hours and hours of working for advisory services, young man, very adventurous. That part of my career I love most.
Thank you. I think we can all agree. I am joined by some incredible leaders, but also some farmers. How many people in this room are also farmers? Oh, come on, I know it's better. We're in Kenya, it's gotta be more than that. Great. Dr. let's start with you. At Equity Bank, and maybe not even just from Equity Bank, but from the broader financial sector perspective, what steps are being taken to increase the usage of financial services among small-scale producers?
Thank you very much. As I earlier on said, 60% of our customers are small-scale farmers across the 8 ecological zones in the country, and of course, in the 6 countries that we operate in. I think our approach to agriculture is strategic. The intent is to have 30% of our balance sheet, that is the funding part, being in agriculture, to correspond with approximately 34% contribution of GDP in agriculture. Our approach, as you have rightly said, coming from the financing sector, we recognized that our role is dependent on how we structure agricultural financing. And we looked at it, the only way we could succeed was to take an approach that is ecosystem driven. It's the entire agricultural food system. So agriculture and food system, end to end, because we recognized that it's not just a value chain, but that ecosystem is systemic in its nature, and it's circular in nature. So essentially we realized our funding becomes a revolving fund. We fund importers of fertilizer and input, then they hand over to the farmers, so we fund the farmers, but it's the same amount that is now being paid back by the importers. Then the aggregators, then the process, all the entire value chain. So we recognized the only way we could benefit is by then 2 things. Adopting an ecosystem approach that moves from preparation to production to post-harvest management to process, and facilitating the market. So all the actors in that entire value chain of the ecosystem. The second one was to recognize with humility that we are only playing a very small part in the entire ecosystem. So the only way then to be able to service it is to take a collaborative partnership approach. Our biggest partner is the government, for instance, of Kenya. And those who know, whether it's Kilimo Biashara and the others, it's all in partnership with the government because of policy and extension services and the voice of the government. It's the citizens are the electors of a government, so they listen to the government, and the voice of government is stronger than that of a financial. The second aspect is partnership with all the actors, such that we are acting together and in sync. The most important is to ensure that we are doing collaboration in sync. And the last one is partners who are furthering and advocating the interest of the small-scale farmers. And that is why we have attended this program and initiative so that we can bring our visibility to our partners, because the most significant is capacitation of the small-scale farmers. You need to enhance their capability, their competence, and knowledge. We are coming from peasantry farming to agro-business farming. That transition is like the way we went to school to learn English. They also need to learn modern agricultural practices. The second one is the aspect of de-risking. And we realize there is a lot of de-risking beyond capacitation, whether it's credit risk sharing, whether it's guarantee system to ensure that the flow of finance is unhindered and is inclusive. Everybody gets access to finance. And of course, we also need technology partners. And in technology, that's when then we can talk about digital. And in digital, we thought we could play a significant role ourselves by providing solutions to our farmers through Equitel. We realized most of them were on Fisher phones, so we decided to bring banking through the Fisher phone by having a SIM card that have a banking solution and digitizing banking and giving them the power to operate that. But having realized that we don't have SIM card to all the farmers, we decided to partner with all the telecoms. So we created interoperability between our systems and all the wallets of all the telecom providers so that the solution is accessible. So collaboration is very significant. And more importantly then is to work with agencies and regulators, whether it's the data regulatory authority, because we are aggregating data through transaction. Partners in the payment space, such that you don't digitize the farming function of the bank, but then you don't integrate it with the other systems. So we took an open systems approach so that our system can interconnect with all, and it becomes our single platform for farmers. And lastly, to enable digitization was then digitize cash and have digital bridges at the village level through equity agents. So we have 66,000 agents across the country. The farmer need not move from the village. They can convert their digital money back to cash from the shopkeeper, and they can convert their cash into digital money using the shopkeeper. Latest is to integrate the farmers with the real economy digitally. And those who know, we now have over 1 million pay with equity merchants. Ensure the entire little end-to-end is digitized, such that whenever the farmers want to spend their digital money, the shopkeeper they go to, whether it's the mama boga or the milk vendor at the village, is accepting digital payment. So that entire framework has enabled us to make a significant contribution. And lastly is to avail our system to be available for all other partners, whether it's regulators, they can play onto the system, whether it's the telecom, they can lead through our systems, so that we don't pretend we are the only service provider to a farmer. A farmer needs more than equity can provide. That humility to recognize that you don't define the needs of the farmer is very central to the success of agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And it reminds me that my first experience with farmers in Kenya was in Karatina, in an equity branch in 2003. And one of the things I loved about working at Equity at that time was what I called the muddy branch. The fact that it was okay to walk into a branch with your muddy shoes as a farmer and interact was a real game changer in the financial sector.
Kamala, it has never changed.
I know. I was in Karatina recently and I took a picture picture of the muddy stairs, if anyone would like my muddy stairs
The
picture.
farmers in Molo still walk in the branches holding their goat or chicken on the heart, and they go to the counter and relate. Those are their economic activities. We recognize them, and we should take them the way they are. They are living their lives, and we integrate their livelihood.
Yeah, but now, as you say, they can spend more time at the agent and not have to go all the way to the bank. Let's move across the borders. Abdul Majid, tell us about the journey of CRDB when it comes to farmers. You've also been working there many years, I know, and you've had a long journey in serving farmers with digital financial services in Tanzania.
Thank you. I want to build from the Mwangi's comment, but I will link it with the theme of collaborations. I think when you speak about small farmers, we understand that it is not easy when you're coming from conventional way of doing business in the banking sector to reach farmers. From CRDB perspective, we have gone through miles of transformations on how we did farmers. Historically, it was a challenge because in Tanzania, 61.7 million populations, almost 80% are farmers, and most of the farmers are women, which are more or less in the village, and much more fragmented with small size of the farm. So finance them has been a challenge, and what has come to our side from a CRDB perspective is to collaborate with what we call AMCOs. That's what we started, AMCOs and cooperatives. During the time, in terms of financing those farmers, it came as a challenge where at the time of harvesting, then AMCOs started to do side selling. That's another lesson we learned. And then we said we should move away from financing AMCO as aggregator, rather than AMCO should be a consolidating entity for individual farmers. And that was number one. Number two, we went further to work with TCDC. As a regulator, how do we support farmers? And number three, went to the ministry. Because the challenge was that we are financing farmers holistically without looking on specific crop, because they have specific need and specific period. And when a farmer is looking for fertilizer, the supply of the fertilizer was supplying the fertilizer, the farmer was paying upfront. Basically, that is starting carrying interest expenses. Now, we engaged the minister responsible. We said, let us redesign the solutions where farmers are given fertilizer and banks are giving assurance to the supplier to be paid at the harvest time. That means the farmer is saving the cost of expenses from the interest side, but also is getting fertilizer on time. Also, the supplier of the fertilizer is also given LC, because he was complaining as well, to import fertilizer to assure a certain period after 3 months to be paid. That was one. Number two, we learned a bigger challenge about data collections, also financial literacy. As a bank, we thought that we may not be able to manage both lending, follow-up, and training. Then the bank, we created what we call CRDB foundations. And within the foundations, one of the observations we noted during our financing, apart from normal financing, farmers need small amount of fund just to prepare their farms, which takes time. Within the foundation, we created also seed capital, and we gave a product name and embed you, where the farmers are given a small facility without interest, just to prepare their farms. But we also bring them to the financial sector, from informal to the formal sector. And then we had with the minister what we call, there's one technology called biz technology and warehouse receipt for those farmers who are sending their goods to the warehouse. Then we started registering farmers during the fertilizer supply, their farm size, the type of crops, their locations. So we have all the data registered. And we're able last year to register about 3.6 million farmers. And that means it is easy now to access them. And that's when we talk about technology. The next step was, because farmers are far away from the normal banks' facilities, because they have their AMCOs, the AMCO were enabled to be agents to start providing financial payments with the device provided. Then individual farmers went further to digitize in terms of how they can register, how they can be able to transact, how can be able to be KYC compliant per regulations. So through their mobile phones, they are able to open their own accounts, register, and be able to sell. And during payments, they are paid digitally, and then they can get their payment through either agents or their own farms. The next step was about how do we create within the same farmers apart, because you finance specific crop, for example, cashew, but the farmer also has maize, which is a different one. It's a different business. And we want them to move away from normal, just a small farmers, to create a business because they have a community around them. They are taking their kids to schools. Their kids, some majority in Tanzanians, they have graduated, but they have not been employed. They're in the village. They are not very good in terms of farming. So we started to create what we call startup within the village and bring them on the boot camp just to train them with our foundations. During the training, we teach them about financial literacy, financial management, and how do you behave in terms of financial management matter, and how do you structure your project-based funding. And we have been able to get very good startup, about 750, but since the startup is more educated, and there is those who are not educated, we have what we call the window through our branches, where in each branches we created a window just for women who are entrepreneurs, because most of them are farmers. And that's what we did. Next item we went with, because CRDB is also accredited as a national entity. When you look on the farming in terms of crop diversity, some need longer tenure than the normal period. So we're able to raise funds together with GCF of about $200 million, sorry, with the intention to reach direct farmer, about 1.2 million direct farmer, which will be benefiting from the same food agri. And this facility comes with guarantee, because they need to be subsidized in terms of de-risking. But we have also set aside in terms of technology provision, which is purely grant. And that has enabled the majority of the farmers to be able to get equipments which can support them from the normal djembe. How do you call it, monkey? Maybe you know better than me. You know, the farmers in the village, you have the hand, now they're using technology. The hoe. Now they are using their proper technology in terms of harvesting, in terms of farming, fertilizer on time. So we see a kind of very transformative of the farming area. And we are happy with, I see the DG for warehouse receipt. One of the challenges about the markets are determined in a specific period, but you have to bring your goods to the warehouse before you get the auctions. Through the warehouse receipt, we integrated ourselves with our receipt through the tripartite agreement between ourselves, the farmer, and the warehouse receipts, where you are able to discount your receipt to get a certain fund to prepare the next seasons. And that is supporting farmer to achieve that. And that's why when you speak about collaborations, becomes critical when you speak about small farmers. Digitizing farmer is the future, because it is very difficult to reach all small farmers in a normal way of farming. And I speak that I'm coming from the farmer. Most of the land are surveyed. It's very difficult to digitize, but through digitizations, it's easy to get those milestones to achieve the farmers. Thank you.
That is quite a journey. Jess, let's turn to you. Now, I'm going to read to you the question that was given to me, and then I'm going to slightly change it. The question that was given to me to ask you was, how can we ensure that women small-scale producers are not left behind? I want to reframe this. Let's not leave them behind. Let's center them in this conversation. So how can we center female small-scale producers in this conversation?
Thank you, Tamara. So it's a very, very good question. Maybe to just start off, I'd like to indicate that as of June 2023, IFC had mobilized and catalyzed over $4.3 billion in the Banking in Women proposition. This is what we're doing with our partner FIs, banks like CRDB and Equity here, and other partner financial institutions. So we do support financial inclusion, especially on the women side, through helping with creating propositions or robust propositions with the banks so that we are able to assist the bank to understand, to do the market survey, understand what's happening in the market, understand what is the ask, and then build a client value proposition that suits or addresses the needs. So that's one aspect that we look at. But also, we try and incentivize our partners. So the department I work with works through financial institutions because of their reach and also of their presence and the ability to access local and very remote places. So we also do try and, we understand that one of the aspects that the banks are trying to solve for is the credit risk that exists within this segment. But more so for women, you find that they have limited access to collateral. So as IFC, we're able to provide risk-sharing facilities to mitigate some of that risk. So we're able to take up to 50% risk on a portfolio basis for funding that goes to or centered to women. But we have another incentive that we try and to drive good behavior. We are able to do what we call performance-based incentives. So we can do a step down in the interest cost if the bank is able to achieve lending to certain agreed targets to women clients.
Is it dangerous for me to ask your two clients here whether they've had a step down? Never mind, just keep going.
They might not have accessed the step down, but they've accessed other things. So it's a good way to segue where I wanted to go. So the other thing that we've also done is we've recently anchored CRDB's first sustainability bond, which they issued. So congratulations to the CRDB team. And the fascinating thing about this bond was that not only was it green, but it spoke to another aspect that I think sometimes is overlooked. We talk about credit, but I think there's a huge hunger in Tanzania and even in the women space to access savings solutions. This was a 5-year bond, and I understand the participation from retail investors was phenomenal. So it speaks to a really great thing in that space. So we anchored that bond, and we are particularly keen on such instruments because, number one, they allow us to access or tap our blended finance to provide local currency, which is what the smallholder producers would be requiring. But also it allows us to be able to meet the pricing indications or requirements. The other thing that maybe I can speak to is how we are supporting other banks in terms of de-risking the ecosystem. I think James mentioned earlier on that they're focusing on providing financing across the ecosystem or the value chain. And we've understood that one of the things that Africa needs to resolve in the future is food security. So how do we encourage the banks to lend from the farmer all the way across to the processors, the producers, the aggregators, and be able to absorb the risk, the different risk types that emanate along that value chain. And again, we are able to either provide funded facilities or we're able to de-risk that whole portfolio, but we are also able to provide technical assistance. We have a whole team internally which deals with just digital financial services. And their role is to help to bring to the table, like collaboration being the big word in today's discussion, they're able to bring other ag techs from other places that can help to make business easier along the different points in the value chain. So IFC has got a team of staff that helps the bank to look at their systems internally, look at what's available in the market, and maybe give the client options on what it is that they could look for. The other thing I also just wanted to speak to is access to markets. I think that's also one of the aspects that needs to be resolved around, when you're talking about agriculture. There's still a significant amount of food that is wasted because it's grown, but maybe it doesn't get to the market in good time, or there's not enough transport, or we don't have the right storage facilities. And it's good that we are seeing a lot of the financing going into that space in terms of just trying to provide storage, but also technology that gives access to farmers on, what's happening in the market, what are the pricing levels, access to, information on your phone real time, access to weather and prices. So those are some of the areas that we continue to support. Then maybe last but not least, I wanted to talk about the other area that IFC focuses on. We have a lot of research that's been done around understanding gender aggregated data. The banks are collecting a lot of data, so helping them to synthesize that and understand that is also an aspect that we are trying to work with the banks and financial institutions on. Thank you.
It's a great place to end. I know that we heard from Sieka this morning that there's going to be a demand side survey launched tomorrow. We at FSD Kenya work with the government of Kenya on the FinAccess survey, which is the FinScope survey in other areas, and we have all this great demand side data that is gender disaggregated or sex disaggregated. I think really pairing that with the supply side data is really powerful, because then it can be used to make better decisions and design better financial solutions for women, for farmers, for micro and small enterprises. So thanks for ending on that note. Let's move to you, Melaku. As a global NGO working in many sectors, today we're talking about agriculture, data, technology, financial services. How do you see those fitting in? What is your perspective as an NGO, especially in this region?
Thank you so much. So let me start by reflecting on the SDGs, and then I will pick the first goal. As we talk, not less than 10% of the world population are under extreme poverty, out of which 2/3 are in Africa, which is roughly 1/3 of the total population of Africa, the figure that was mentioned earlier by my colleague, around 1.4 million people. So there is a growing concern that we might not be able to achieve the SDGs come 2030 unless there is renewed effort. And then this is further exacerbated and hampered by economic shocks, climate change, conflict, be it our own internal or conflict elsewhere. As we know, the impact of Ukraine conflict, what it has impacted in terms of economic shocks, of course, not just the immediate impact of the conflict. So this all really require us to do business differently and do in a different way. So as I think about ourselves as international development and of course humanitarian organization, for the purpose of this conversation, I will be focusing on the development side of that. In addition to what my colleague mentioned earlier, SECA, as innovators, accelerating innovation, and then convening or brokering relations or convening ecosystems, we have also other important roles to play in this space. As you know, as international organizations, we are deeply connected to communities, and then our vision also puts communities at the center, out of whom also the most marginalized, to build inclusive and resilient future. What does that mean? How do we really play our role as facilitators in helping and engaging with the host of partners with public, private sector to develop customer-centric products? And most importantly, from the perspective I gave earlier, the concern group for us, the underserved, pastoralists, agro-pastoralists, marginalized, you call them in different ways. We are all after those target segments, but we need to do our business differently, where we go beyond scratching the surface, rather convene the dysfunctionality of some of the systems to help those people, as my colleagues here in the panel said, access to markets, access to finance, access to products and service, and then other factors of production in livestock agriculture and other labor market sector and beyond. So, a number of tactics are employed, of course, over the years. In Africa, we work in over 18 countries, and then some of great examples from East Africa. I will not go into all the details, but de-risking is one of the things. When we talk about private sector and talk about the segment of people I mentioned earlier, the private sector looks at business cases, incentives. Then how do we de-risk that to push further to be able to serve those people of concern? And obviously capacity building, helping them in design customer-centric products and services, more of facilitation role. So there is huge part that we have been playing and will continue to play. And I also think that our approach sometimes need to have also, we really need to work our way out from some functions and allow others to really come in and then take over certain functions. Because the magnitude and complexity of the problems that I mentioned call an increased collaboration, innovation, and then thinking differently. So we see ourselves in this space as playing that kind of role, and then AgriFin is a great example of that. Siaka told us the journey. Over those years, 15 million smallholder farmers, smallholders, over 150 partnerships in over 7 countries in Africa. This was only be able to achieve because of the collaborations, and then the role that we thought have taken is the right one in this space. Not treating the symptoms, rather stepping back and then convening in the ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're hearing the importance of collaboration loud and clear from every panelist. Unfortunately, the cast has not been able to join us yet, I don't think. And therefore, we don't have a government representative up here, and yet we know, and we've already heard from each of you and from the opening speeches, the critical role that government plays in this conversation. So perhaps I'll ask each of you to reflect briefly on what you see as the important role of government in this conversation and really reaching the small-scale producers with the solutions they need to meet the SDGs, to see the government support them. Any takers? You didn't know this question was coming, so they have to speak off the cuff. If you could provide a piece of advice to government about how they could increase incentives to invest in farmers and or collaborate and coordinate, what would you advise? Please.
If I go first, I think government would play a very significant role in building and enabling policy framework. I think the most important thing, particularly where you have many actors, you need collaboration that need to be catalyzed and enabled by policy. The second aspect is the issue of looking at agriculture increasingly beyond being a social department. It should be a leader, because agriculture, we say, and we had, provides livelihood to almost 70% of rural populations. It should be seen as an investment, and not just a development issue, but an investment asset class. If we treat agriculture as an investment class, like all the other sectors, it will start drawing capital. But to really achieve that, then the entire value chain needs to be enabled. Markets are the most important thing. If you give farmers access to functional markets that provides a fair price, the right price, the markets, the farmers will be pulled through the power of a functional markets. But there is a lot of infrastructure that also government needs to really enable. And we can talk, for instance, digital platform ecosystems. If the government is serious, that will be the starting point. It brings ease, it brings convenience, and it enables farmers to be in control. And essentially, then farmers start aggregating their data, and then you could really then start talking of open financial services for us in finance. You could talk of providing banking as a service, so that fintechs and all the others play a very significant role. And the last one, if really government could be the convener of partnerships. Whether, for instance, we are talking about partnership in green and social finance partnership, whether it's capacity building partnership, the convening power of government is very, very substantial. And lastly, is the right incentives. We have too much incentives from government, but most of them might not targeted at the right level. Food security eventually will require. If we take railways, roads, airports as public good, why don't we take the infrastructure that enables small-scale farming as a public good? Why do we get the farmers to pay for public good? They are ill-prepared, they are ill-equipped, and they are not, and it's really diminishes their return because they don't enjoy great economies of scale. So there's a case for government to really invest much more.
Go ahead.
If I can just add on what Dr. Mwangi has said, I think another role that government can play is to reduce market distortion. It's important that they let the market dynamics play out and let the market find the pricing. Government can also create regulatory environment for digital delivery of financial services. I mean, here we're talking about e-KYC, e-processing, and data protection. I think there's already work that started in this space. So just trying to ensure that the right policies and procedures are embedded is really, really critical. And also I echo the fact that they need to create a conducive regulatory environment for production, trade and processing, including health and safety regulations. I think those are quite key. And then, I mean, like Dr. Mwangi mentioned, supporting open data for agriculture, connecting agriculture data to users. It's all good that we're collecting all this data, but how can we harvest it and actually use it, like you were mentioning earlier on? Thanks.
Okay.
Yes. To me, I think, first of all, apart from being a CEO of CRDB, I'm the chairman for Tanzania Commission for Cooperatives. And recently, the government has already created a platform which is unified system for digitizing all the farmers. Of course, the thinking was coming from a regulatory perspective. Now, what I would advise basically is the system to be a platform and first embrace innovation and adoptive fintech framework. Because we have quite significant number of fintechs who have already designed good solutions, good technology. They have not been enabled to integrate. Number two, the government has to get away from politicizing agriculture and let it be commercial business. Because since it's the mass product, which is for citizens, tend to be politicized in terms of price determinations, price forecast, let it be a commercial perspective. The third item, which is very important, is about infrastructure. Because most of these are in the rural area, so getting there is difficult, transporting goods becomes expensive, so they have to create roads. But storage facilities, for example, with the climate change, the last 3 days it has been raining. So most of the farmers may get difficult to store their goods. So they have to get good storage facilities. Number 4 is about providing incentives in terms of policy review by providing some of guarantee schemes which support agriculture, which will enable commercial banks and other potential financiers to adopt because it becomes less risky to finance those sectors. And number 5 is to incentivize those who are in agriculture, who are financing, whether commercial banks or non-commercial banks, be incentivized in terms of structural, in terms of determinations, and how it's being reported in the financial perspective. Because from the banking perspective, capital becomes key, and how you compute it with the commercial perspective becomes a challenge. So agriculture, if treated equally, is risky. And the last one, they have to provide incentive for long-term financing, because agriculture is not a short-term kind of product. Some need longer-term financing, and there's been a challenge in the long-term financing. We are happy that we have been working with IFC. We have recently raised our green bonds, long-term funding, but it's very limited resource in terms of liquidity. I think, but also the government has to work collaboratively, because there is different ministries which are managing agriculture, but they are not interoperable. So that needs harmonizations to support agriculture if we're to support the small farmers in the country. Thank you.
Anything to add?
I don't think I would add much. It has been said quite a lot. One thing I want to emphasize, though, is the role of government in increasing investment on public goods and services. So the whole thing we discuss in agri, finance, and all those things, the prerequisites are infrastructure and other forms of investment. And then depending on where you are also, government plays critical role where there is underdeveloped private sector to offer certain goods and services. If I give you an example from my country, Ethiopia, the extension service is predominantly public sector extension service. It's not privatized as such. There is a discussion around that one. So the whole idea of really having more extension workers, the density of extension, the ratio of extension worker to probably farmers is one of the decent one in Africa. So that is a kind of investment. So you can't immediately foresee for private sector to offer extension service. So I'm just emphasizing the value of public goods and the services where the private sector is not ready, and then of course emphasizing the role of government on the basic infrastructure development, in addition to what my colleagues have mentioned on the regulatory environment. Thank you.
I think that was a lot of great advice and input for government. I hope government is listening. I think one of the important things for us to consider, maybe one last question before we move towards wrapping up, you know, with the current technology that's possible, with what we've learned about farming, with what we've the data that's out there, we've got this beautiful possibility frontier of new financial solutions for farmers that maybe didn't used to exist 20 years ago. However, we also have a very significant, which many of you have mentioned, climate change crisis. We have environmental degradation that is pushing against that. Would anyone like to comment additionally, in addition to what you've said, about the impact of climate change and environmental degradation on this conversation that we're having? Please.
I think I will just give an example, I think, from CRDB perspective. When you speak about climate change, I've just referred about the raining period. This time is very challenging. And what we have done from CRDB, we have partnered with Pula Insurance for weather insurance to cover risk in terms of weather, but also forecast in terms of pricing. That protects the farmers in terms of the investment, but also there is a need to innovate specific solutions that fits for specific products within the locations. I think insurance, we address the majority of the problem. And the good thing, the insurance is digitized. That means you're able to insure your product given the size of the farm, and it covers you for the seasons. Thank you.
Great. Anything to add?
I think the big issue of our generation is climate change and preservation of nature. And if you look at agriculture and farming in general, it's built on natural resources or nature capitals, whether it is the soil, whether it's the water, and all that. So when you then talk of impact of climate change, then the farmers are the most vulnerable and most exposed because their whole economic activities are built on nature. As a result, it is important then we, both government, the private sector, reach out maybe to support the farming community. The first area we could really support farming community is restoration of nature, and particularly the health of soil. If you look in this region, productivity has been declining consistently, and the single largest contributor is the loss of health of the soil. How do we restore the health of soil? The second aspect that is significantly contributing beyond is the issue of agriculture being rain-fed or rain-dependent agriculture. And this entire Horn of Africa region has missed 3-5 consecutive rain seasons until the last season. And as you can see, what eventually we have almost lost is the entire grasslands in the region because of 5 consecutives. So the issue is really urgent interventions that helps to restore nature. And lastly then is how to support the farmers to mitigate and adapt. And I think that most of these are beyond the individual farmers. At the farmer level, individual small-scale farmer, it becomes very difficult. And maybe organizing the farmers so that they become, they have the economies of scale, they have relevance, they have a voice that can be heard, will be helpful in helping farmers to mitigate and adapt. But they will not mitigate and adapt unless they are supported, one, in building capacity. It's good to use the terms mitigate and adapt, but those are technical terms to a farmer. We need to really break that down. What are the activities a farmer needs to do to be able to mitigate and adapt to the climate change? But while we mitigate and adapt, help farmers, there are issues that we could really bring quickly. Partnerships that provide green and social finance would then be a big contribution because then it makes these initiatives much, much more affordable. Partnerships in capacity building for the farmers, knowledge sharing, whether it is on platforms, government partnerships between private and public sector so that the government can take the core of what is not commercially financeable. Then government, the issue of de-risking partnerships to help to de-risk the adverse effect of climate change to the farmers would be very, very central. And lastly is helping building value chain and ecosystem supply chains that brings farmers together so that they act collectively.
Great. Anything to add? Or?
Yeah, maybe I can add. Let me be specific here. Talking about the arid, semi-arid, and then pastoral, agro-pastoral areas that are significantly affected by the impact of climate change. When we look at the most recent drought in the Horn of Africa, which is actually the worst in 4 decades, where we had 5 to 6 failed seasons, And then what does that mean for pastoralists, agro-pastoralists in these areas? As Mercy Corps, we have significant presence in those arid, semi-arid, pastoral, agro-pastoral areas. So it's extremely difficult to think about food security, economic growth in these areas without bringing water security in the equation. That's one piece, because as I mentioned earlier in my opening, this has become the new normal. Even the recurrence of drought and other externalities is increasing. So we need to think differently. So without water security, it's extremely impossible to think that. And also, pastoral way of life is also evolving. It's not the same as what we know 10 years, 15 years or so before. And then I think the other piece in the equation, pastoralism, is not just the livestock. It's about the natural resource management and then rangeland governance. These are really critical pieces connecting to what I mentioned earlier in terms of the evolving nature of pastoralism from many angles, mobility, herd size, you name them. So we have to really think differently to make this way of production more viable in the face of climate change, focusing on some of the key pillars I mentioned earlier. Thank you.
Thank you. And I really appreciate that you talked not only about the risks, especially for those most vulnerable, the women, the pastoralists, the small-scale producers, but also the opportunities. And I think that's really important to make sure, as we talked with especially the financial sector leaders, sometimes they can be focused on the risks. And then when they realize there are opportunities in this space, it helps them think differently, as you say. We've just got a few minutes left, and this event, learning is literally in the middle name. You have all been sharing the learning that you have experienced as leaders in this field. But as we think about the next 2 days, as we think about the next year until the next annual learning event, what learning questions are still open for you in this area? What things do you not yet know that you hope to learn, that you'd love to learn more about? And I didn't give them warning on this, so we'll see what they say on this one. Jess, can I start with you?
Okay, so maybe, for me, food security for Africa is a must. It's not an option. And I believe that our ability to achieve food security will come on how we can collaborate all the different efforts and pockets of work that's happening across the different areas. So the question for me is, how do we rally and convene like-minded people so that we can actually scale the efforts that we are putting into the markets? So if we can, at least come to the table and agree that this is how we're going to structure our efforts going forward, that would be a great plus for me. Let's learn about that. Dr.
I think the theme of this conference has 3 bold words: resilience, inclusive, and sustainability. But the same phrases are used when you talk about climate change. It's about resilience, it's about inclusivity in everything we do, and it's about sustainability. I think for agriculture, or in climate change, we talk sustainability as using nature to provide for us without compromising the ability of nature to provide for future generations. What is the understanding of sustainability of agriculture? Is it us producing for our food security without compromising the food security of future generations?
Amen.
I'd like to learn more.
Amen. I'd like to learn more about that. Please.
I think for me, given the theme, the one word which I would like to take away, how do we create impact for those who are in this room, in line with collaborations through technology, but ensuring there is inclusive. So from perspective, and I'm speaking as CRDB now, I have a technical expert in the room. I will be happy to get more partners from this room to see how best we can transform agriculture, but create impact to those who are unprivileged, and especially for small farmers. And that's what I'm looking for.
Thank you. Last word.
I think for me, in the coming 2 days, one of the first questions that pop up when we talk about digitally enabled solutions or market systems development is the term inclusion, the people, the profile I mentioned earlier. I'm really looking forward to learn more from the partners in the room on what that really looks like, any new thinking around that of the people of concern. Youth, women, underserved, pastoral, agro-pastoral, smallholder, you name it. So depending on where you are. So that's one thing I'm looking forward to. Thank you.
I think that's why all of us are here, and a great way to end. Please join me in thanking this fantastic panel.